Well, we were asked by Philip Dodd, who was at that point the director of the ICA, Institute of Contemporary Arts, because he'd been given, or the ICA had been given Trafalgar Square by the Mayor of London's office to stage an event, and he decided he would like to show the film Battleship Potemkin by Eisenstein, silent film classic, and get someone to produce a new score. And for some reason, he thought of us. It was such a strange request. We discussed it with him and thought it was an interesting project to take on because, firstly, it was a great event, a big free concert in Trafalgar Square on a Sunday evening in the summer. It's obviously a wonderful film. And also in the music we work in the area of music we work in, you don't really get a chance to write 73 minutes of continual music. And we were quite interested to see whether we actually could do that, whether we would be able to do that. And it's not really even just a soundtrack, because when you write a soundtrack for a normal movie, people talk over it and have car chases and make love and all the rest of it. Whereas this, you are really the sound. You're kind of 50% of the experience. And that was an interesting thing as well, I think.
One of the perceptions of the Pet Shop Boys is that Neil is the arty one who's into the classical music. Chris is the one who goes out clubbing all night.
True.
So when this was suggested, did this meet with equal enthusiasm?
Well, apparently, although I can't remember, I was more keen on this project than Neil. For some reason. I don't know why.
I thought, Chris will want to do this anyway, and I'm not. I thought, it's sort of interesting, isn't it? It's a lot. I just thought was it's a lot of work. We're not going to get paid anything. It's going to take loads of energy and time. And Chris won't want to do it anyway. And then Chris said, it sounds great. Are we doing it then?
I just thought it was interesting to be able to write music that didn't have to conform to a standard pop song structure. To be more free form in what you were doing and just react to the visuals that you were watching rather than what we normally do. I think we've always done things that are outside the world of pop in terms of stage shows and writing a musical and, just vary things and try different things. Keep it interesting, really.
What about the writing process? Because you say it's 73 minutes continuous music. You already have the film there as the basis to write the music to. So how did it differ working on the music for this to, say, writing an album?
Because we were writing to the film. And so the structure of the music was determined by the structure of the film. The film is actually in 5 separate chapters. So it says chapter 2 or part 2, drama in the harbour. So we firstly took those subdivisions of the film, and then within some of those chapters there are further subdivisions. So we followed the structure of the film. So it's unusual to have a piece of music to write that has got to be 3 minutes, 5 seconds. It was like nothing else ever written because you're writing for a very specific mood and purpose in each scene. You're trying to amplify the mood. Whereas with a pop song, you kind of start off sort of noodling around and have an idea and then turn the idea into a song. With this, you had a very specific dramatic idea and you had to somehow turn that into music. So it's really quite a different process than us making an album. We were lucky in that we had the opening piece of the music, which is called Comrades. Chris had actually already written. A couple of years ago, we brought out a greatest hits album, and you have to do this ridiculous thing where you have to write 2 new hits, which is, as any pop star would tell you, is a very tricky thing to do. Suddenly have to write 2 new songs that then have to become hits, which actually astonishingly we more or less managed to do. But anyway, Chris, the purpose in the middle of writing new songs, Chris suddenly came up with this little piece of semi-classical music she played on a string sound, and we recorded and put away somewhere. And so we dug that out, and it was this rather strident theme, which seemed perfect for the opening of the film, which is where the leader of the sailors is making a very bold speech, sort of saying they should all get together and do something about their bad conditions. And that became a theme which then comes back in. So we were lucky in that we had something to start with from the beginning, because often it's like writing the first line of a book, I suppose. You've got to have somewhere to start. And we were lucky that that was already there.
Was the plan always to work with Dresden Symphonica and with an orchestrator, or was it initially, did the ICA just say, we would like the Pet Shop Boys to write some music?
Yeah, they didn't want an orchestra. There was no budget for an orchestra. They said we might be able to get a free choir, but we wanted an orchestra.
When we'd written the first 40 minutes of it, we thought, we've got to have strings. We didn't want a full orchestra. We wanted strings. Around about this time, I'd heard this piece of music, Mein Herz brennt, by Torsten Rasch, which is a song cycle based on the music, or based on the songs of the hard rock group Rammstein. And I was really knocked out by this piece of music. We wondered, rather than get a pop arranger in, what it would be like if we got a classical composer in and asked him to work with us on it, to kind of take the sort of tonality away from pop tonality a little bit. And this was a very difficult collaboration because Torsten Rasch is in the school of Berg and then back Mahler and what have you. His music is quite dissonant, but at the same time, it's, melodies and recognisably tuneful, whatever's there. And he's writing against our electronic music. And it started off, it was impossible. To be honest, it was completely impossible. At one point, I suggested we sacked the Pet Shop Boys from the project. And it just became a Torsten Rasch project. But anyway, there's a marvellous man called Sven Helbig who runs the Dresden Symfonica, who'd performed this Rammstein work. And so we thought that they should play it anyway. And he really acted as the intermediary. And we came up with what is a very interesting compromise, really, between the two types of music. There are certain pieces of music where we left it quite open, where maybe we just write beats, really, and a melody, and so he could work within that in a more free kind of way. And I think what we ended up with was, for Torsten particularly, was a compromise, but I think it's something very, very powerful and quite unusual from a pop direction. There's things that you wouldn't do in a pop record.
When it came to the night of the performance, I seem to recall it started raining about an hour beforehand.
Typically, yeah.
Were you expecting the crowd that turned up? Because I went with a friend and we were sort of standing towards the back because there were so many people there, saying you would not expect this many people to turn up on a rainy night in September to see a 1925 Russian black and white silent movie.
It's a tricky thing because we had no idea how many people would turn up. Because when you buy a ticket for something, you've made a commitment, haven't you? You bought the tickets, you're presumably going to go. With a free concert, you sort of might go, you sort of might not go. You might even set off to go and then go to the pub on the way instead. Someone I know did. And so we were kind of nervous.
Particularly nervous about the weather.
And the weather.
Because it's very windy as well as raining, and we're a bit worried that the huge screen wouldn't be safe. So the main worries were about the weather conditions, really.
And of course, as you say, about an hour beforehand, it hadn't rained for 2 weeks. I don't think it rained for 2 weeks afterwards either. But having said that, it kind of added to the atmosphere because it wasn't heavy rain. From the stage, it looked really amazing because the police estimate was around about 20,000 people. From the stage, it looked really incredible because there was, we were obviously under the screen with the orchestra, and so you could see all these heads looking up at the film, and then this drizzle and the light and everything. It had a very powerful sense of occasion from the stage. It was really quite a moving thing, actually, to watch the people watching it. And of course, as someone remarked afterwards, it must be the biggest audience there's ever been for silent film in Britain. People really seem to concentrate because it's a film you need to watch, and people were really concentrating, and you could see there was this very interesting atmosphere, and meanwhile the buses were going past. It was a very moving occasion to be standing on the stage.
Was it always planned to bring it out as a CD?
Not necessarily. No, it wasn't actually. We recorded it actually around approximately a year ago because we wanted to record it to know what it was going to sound like, to get the right balance of electronics and strings, and we didn't want to bring it out when the concert was on, because otherwise it would just look like you're promoting an album, do you know what I mean? And we wanted it to be this completely unique occasion in London. We didn't even know whether EMI would want to release it either, but they were very keen to release it. And we waited, because we're doing more concerts actually. We're doing 4 performances this coming week in Germany. And again, we wanted it to be sort of fresh for the people seeing it in Germany, rather than you just promoting an album kind of thing.
And you say most of the soundtrack is instrumental. There are a few pieces on there with lyrics, and one in particular, which occurs during the Odessa Step sequence, which is probably the most famous bit of the film, is After All. Now, the lyrics, listening to it on the night and also listening to it again on the CD, seem to have a more modern resonance than necessarily going back to sort of 1913.
Yes, well, when we were asked to do it by Philip Dodd of the ICA, he pointed out, that Trafalgar Square was a political space in the centre of London, where since Trafalgar Square was first created, I think in the 1830s, there's been endless political meetings and demonstrations, from the Chartists through CND up to the anti-war demonstrations before the war in Iraq. And I thought it would be quite interesting writing. There's another song in the music which is called No Time for Tears, which directly comes from the captions on the screen and what people are apparently saying on the screen. But this one I thought we were going to have almost like the sort of speech someone might give from the base of Trafalgar Square and put it to music and put it in the most moving and violent part of the film, this terrible massacre that happens on the Odessa steps. So it's a juxtaposition of the present with the past that's happening in the film. And I think it was very powerful because it keeps saying, how come we went to war? And you see this terrible massacre going on. So it is a kind of war. But you're almost seeing the reality of war on the screen while these questions are being asked in the song. Actually, and as a song, I think it's funny enough, I think it's one of my favourite songs we've ever written, really. I think it's a very strong piece of music. I think it works as a pop song and as a, orchestral piece of music.
It is almost 20 years since West End Girls was released. In addition to, I lost count of how many singles and albums, there's a feature film, a number of very theatrical stage shows, a musical, now this soundtrack. It strikes you kind of developed two careers. On the one hand, this huge pop group, and on the other hand, this sort of cultural project seems to be going on. Is that something you're keen to do and keen to continue?
Yes, in fact, this project's under the name Tennant Lowe.
Yes, I meant
which
to say.
Is new, which I think probably expresses that quite clearly, that we've got another outlet for our whatever called Tennant Lowe. And so, yeah, we've always liked to do different things, though, and this is part of that.
One of the great things about being in a successful pop group is that you get opportunities to do things. And rather than just concentrate on pop songs, it's quite nice to take up some of those opportunities, I think. And also, we've always, when we came into pop music, we wanted to bring things from outside pop music into it. And I think, that's with the stage shows, we worked with Derek Jarman and Sam Taylor Wood and a couple of guys from English National Opera, it's just to do entertaining things, to be honest, at its most basic. Part of trying to entertain people is surprising them, I think. And also, it keeps it sort of fresh. I sometimes worry that people think the Pet Shop Boys, that we alienate people because they think we're sort of too pretentious or something. And really what we're trying to do normally is to do something that's very entertaining and trying to explore different ways of doing that. Because, pop music, which is also an industry, things get formulaic very easily, and I think we're always trying to break out of the formula. And we have, right from the word go, that's what we were trying to do, is to break out of the formula.
And does the pop side of the Pet Shop Boys carry on? Because it's nearly 4 years, I think, since your last studio album now.
It's 3, yeah. Well, actually, we're busy. We're halfway through making one. We're working with producer Trevor Horn, who in the late 80s produced the song Left Mind Devices for us. And over the years, he produced Frank Goes to Hollywood very famously, and Grace Jones and Seal, Tattoo, was a couple of years ago. And we decided to work with him again because he likes big kind of orchestral pop, and we're making this very big orchestral sort of pop album.
Listening to the albums in order, they always seem to move. So, say, Behaviour was viewed at the time as being very emotional and very adult, and the Pet Shop Boys are growing up, and then straight after Very is 12 pop songs.
Yeah.
So Release, again, was viewed as quite a sort of toned down, sort of chilled out, quieter album. Is this going to be a...
It is. Very predictable. Yeah. I think we always react against what we've just done previously. Fed up with being one or the other. So.
Very few pop groups, particularly very few pop groups that emerged in the 1980s, are still around. After 20 years, with sort of a pop industry that's full of people from the X Factor and all this kind of thing, do you ever think, I've had enough of this now?
The only thing you can have enough of is sometimes the commercial pressure. But otherwise, no, because it's so enjoyable what we do. Making a new record like the moment we're doing with Trevor Horn is such a lot of fun, and it's so satisfying. And also, it's exciting what it's going to sound like and everything. But no, I don't think we do. Actually, I think pop music's perked up a bit recently. When I was on holiday the other week, I was reading the Sun newspaper, and they were saying they were going through, I think there's a new series of the X Factor, one of these things, and they just went through it all and said, actually, it hasn't really worked, has it, commercially? The only person who's had a career out of all of that is Will Young, who, interestingly, what you might recall, Simon Cowell was furious when he won that programme because he thought he wasn't a pop star. And Will Young is the only one that's gone on to develop a genuine kind of George Michael-y kind of career. And the rest of it has just been dross, really, that's had a momentary success and then faded away. So I think you might find that the music industry is starting to lose interest in it because it's not doing anything long term. At the same time, we've suddenly seen a big upsurge of pop groups writing interesting songs with sort of integrity. Like the biggest selling albums of the last year or so have been the Kaiser Chiefs, the Scissor Sisters, the Killers. These are all recognizable pop groups doing it with something to say and a look, and I think there's something really quite exciting. And you've got the kind of Pete Doherty soap opera going on, which is, he's a talented guy, I think it's actually quite a good time for pop music.